Hello, everyone. Welcome to the New Ways podcast. My name is Shel Fuller. Thank you for joining us. This is our first podcast. Many of you may have listened to my old podcast, the Elixir podcast, during the COVID times. That's where I had a chance to, I was basically just focusing on musicians. I had a chance to interview the legendary Martha Wash, the fabulous Ultra Nate, and several other people, Berlin artists and artists from all over the world. So that was a great honor to be able to do that. And now there's been like a 2-year break, and now I'm back with a new podcast, the New Ways podcast. The New Ways, because that's also my artist name as DJ and producer. So that's the reason why it's called the New Ways podcast. So this format of this podcast is going to be different, mainly because I noticed from the last podcast, I enjoy talking to musicians, but I also realized there's like so many other people I really want to talk to, and there's so many other subjects I would like to cover. So most of the podcasts probably will be interviews. There will be podcasts like today's podcast where I'm talking about a specific topic or issue. Or podcasts where I'm focusing on just one specific topic, so a hot topic or something. But most of the time, I'm going to probably be interviewing all sorts of people. So I have coming up an interview with a cultural anthropologist and coincidentally my best friend. And I also have a great buddy of mine who's also a producer, Professor Dictabeat. He's always on the go. He's always on the move. And I just want to talk to him about how he stays so busy and so successful. And hopefully a whole host of other people. So like I said, I think over the next few podcasts, we'll start to figure out exactly organically how it's going to flow. But the main focus is to talk to people. But like I said, today's podcast is going to be also one of those exceptional podcasts where I'm talking about a topic because the topic is really important and it's sort of upsetting. And it's about a situation that's involving a woman named Michele Johnson who has cerebral palsy. She's had that since she was born, a really severe cerebral palsy. And her sister, who's also her caregiver, Sherice. And they have a house through HUD, and they are about to be evicted and put onto the streets because of a really evil landlord, and also because HUD is just they're not doing their job. So I want to bring some focus to this. Since you're watching this on YouTube, you'll also see, just to back up everything I'm saying, I'm also going to be providing documentation on the screen. I've blacked out the address of where they are located, of course, for privacy reasons, and maybe some phone numbers. But I want everyone to be able to see the exact documentation that basically that I'm seeing. So just in order to be totally transparent, Sherice Bennett is my mother, and Michele Johnson is also my auntie. So I grew up with her. And this is a really serious situation because this affects basically anyone, especially in Miami. I know that there are different HUD offices, but in Miami, they're just not doing their job. So let me start off with a little bit of background information about this topic. So my grandmother, so like I said, Michele, she was born in 1966. She was born with cerebral palsy. She has severe cerebral palsy, which means she has very limited mobility, meaning she's been in a wheelchair basically her whole life. Or when she was younger, she could crawl on the floor, but now she has too much stiffness in her muscles, so she can't. It's too much pain. She does talk, but she doesn't like talk in sentences because I grew up with her, and the family, grew up. We understand her and her bodily expressions and the few words that she can say, so we know what she means, and we also know that she understands us. Like when you ask her if she's hungry or something, she can tell you yes or no. She's a really just a lovely person. So also going to be showing some pictures of her so you can see her. So they basically told my grandmother when she was born, yeah, she has cerebral palsy, and she probably won't live past her 18th year or 19th year, and you should put her in an institution. And my grandmother basically said, yeah, fuck that. She's coming home. That's my daughter, and raised her. And I think Michele is now 50. She was 66. I don't know what that is. Like 56, 57. So I keep telling everybody she's going to outlive us all, I'm sure. She's very well taken care of. But to continue with her, the cerebral palsy. So she has limited mobility. She has also epilepsy. So she takes medication to calm that down, because without the medication, she is prone to have seizures. She needs assistance with everything, so she can't get dressed. She can feed herself, but she can't bathe herself. She can't dress herself. She can't go to the toilet by herself. She can't do all of this sort of stuff by herself. And once my grandmother died in 2005, she became the legal guardian in 2007. It took a while in order to get the paperwork. So she's her official guardian, and they've been together ever since, basically since then. So my mother found a house to rent from a guy named Banks. And it's a house that's perfect for her. At the time, my brother was also living there, but he's moved out. But now it's a house for Michele, for my mom, and my mom's husband. It's like 4 bedrooms, so it's actually a really nice small house. It's perfect for them. So as you know, so HUD is a part of it's basically a program. So where it's part of the housing program. So basically, if you're a person and you don't earn a certain amount of money, so you're really like under a certain level, and to be honest with you, they're definitely below that level, because even together, my Sherice and Michele together only bring in about $25,000 a month. So that tells you pretty much everything. But HUD is part of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They have programs which subsidize houses, so which means that you get a special sort of voucher. You find a person who has a HUD house who's registered. You will pay for, maybe just as an example, a loose example. Say the rent is $1,000, you might have to pay $250, and then HUD will pay the other $750 for you directly to the landlord. So that's the kind of program that she has, and everything's going well. She's paying her rent. She's on time. No issues with that. Actually, at the beginning, the first issue was the landlord lied to her about the actual rent, her portion of the rent. HUD hadn't informed her. It took them a while to get her the paperwork, actually a few months. And then he said it was higher than it was. So technically, right at this moment, she has an overpayment by him of over $2,000, which he refuses to give back to her. So that's number one. So all of it. So for the last few months, he has really been like dropping hints. He basically wants her to leave. And the reason he wants her to leave, they want them both to leave, is because part of one of the requirements as a landlord through the HUD program is that you have inspections. That means someone comes out, they inspect the house, and if there are any sort of major damage or repairs that need to be done that are not created by the person renting the house, but it could be just wear and tear, the house is old or whatever, these things need to be repaired. So he doesn't want to do repairs. Actually, what we have found out in the meantime is that allegedly he has sold the house to someone else, which we'll get to that later. And the supposed new owner of the place has already told my mother directly, we want you out so that we can renovate the house, and then we're going to lift the rent really high and make a lot more money. So basically, they're going to do what they should have been doing the whole time now for their own benefit. So We'll get to the list of basically the repairs that need to be done. So this has been going back and forth about the repairs. He hasn't been making the repairs, or he's been doing half-ass repairs. And suddenly, on one day, my mother was taking a sleep. So Sherice was taking a nap, and she woke up to a letter on her door from a company called Real Deal Investors. I'm going to show you the letter on the screen. What's interesting about this letter, first when I saw it, I was like, well, it has no letterhead. Like, there's no address. There's no information about anything. Secondly, what's interesting about this, about a week before this letter was posted on her door, an insurance company came out and said they were appraising the house or reviewing the house for the owner, so Mr. Banks. And then suddenly, a week later, the house has been sold. Now, we're going to get to that in a second, because what we're realizing is that the new owner won't show proof that the house is that he bought the house. And also, when you go inside of the actual system, the Dade County system, to look up the house to see if the change of ownership, the title, that either hasn't been updated or there actually hasn't been a sale. So without actually showing someone saying, hey, we bought the house, to show proof, it would be, I would say it's the equivalent of me walking over to your apartment and just walking in and just saying, hey, listen, I need you to move out by the end of the month because I just bought the place and you need to move out, with no proof that the place actually belongs to me or anything of that sort. So it already starts off fishy. So to get back to this letter, so he puts this letter on her door. And the first thing I noticed was, okay, so termination is misspelled. Okay, that's a great beginning. And then I see the next thing is they're basically saying that she has to basically leave the place. They're actually canceling her lease, because they're saying it's a month-to-month tenancy, and that's not true through HUD. It's a totally different thing. The guy actually didn't know that it was a HUD house, but that's another story. And then it says, okay, it's going to be terminated by October 13th. So now, according to state of Florida, one of the following three explanations must be given. It either needs to be non-payment of rent, violation of lease terms, meaning you've destroyed property or anything of that sort, or it's the end of lease or termination without cause. So you can terminate without a cause, but you need to state it clearly. So we're terminating, and then be like, okay, we're terminating it not because of your own fault, but because what ABC. So that's not even given here. So the next thing is basically he writes in here sort of a detail of like an offer. So we will pay you this amount in exchange for the keys and evacuation. If you move out of the apartment by this date, if you don't move out by this date, then you get less. And this is, of course, this is not an agreement. So, for example, the text says they want to pay after she moves out, which this isn't a legal binding agreement. So, in the end, she can just move out, and then he just says, oh, no, we're not going to give you the money. This is not a binding agreement. This does not represent an agreement between two parties. There's no signature. There's no offer. There's no acceptance. There's no consent. There's no legality to it. So basically, he's saying, this is what I want. But instead of coming directly to her and saying, hey, we bought the property. Here's the paperwork for the property. We need you to move out of the house by a reasonable date, which is also another issue. What we're going to do is we're going to put together an agreement, and we're both going to sign it. If these conditions are met, this is what you will receive, or blah, blah, blah. That is something that has not been done. This right here is just making a statement. You couldn't take this to court. There's no way that you can even enforce this. It's just basically someone writing something on a piece of paper. And as I said before, we don't even know if the person even owns the house. So then you see at the bottom, it says Real Deal Investors. So other than this name, Real Deal Investors, and also at the bottom, you'll see a telephone number, which I actually personally tried to call twice and just got voicemail. He refused to pick up the call. There's no other contact information for this company. I did find out that the company is based in Miami Lakes. And the company supposedly has been around for 2 or 3 years, but they have not filed any sort of financial statements. So no annual statements. And for an investor, a company that's supposed to be a real estate investment company, then, you would assume that they would have sort of an annual report, stating sort of what their revenue was and what their losses were or whatever. But none of that is listed. There's nothing. It's actually totally clean. There's actually nothing even filed. Additionally, if you're a real estate investment company in Florida, you require a license, and that license must be on all contracts and documentation. And as you can see here, there's no letterhead. There's no information. It wasn't until the second time this David visited my Sherice and Michele that we even knew that it was actually a real person, because we thought this letter is sort of it doesn't make any sense that someone just puts this letter on your door when you don't even know who it is. And I think that's just a little ridiculous. Now, one thing about the house is that the house has one part of the house was added on to by the owner banks. The house was originally 2 bedrooms, and then before my mother moved in, there he added 2 other rooms, which actually he didn't get a permit for. It's not permitted. It's basically the whole side where you see the red box is basically shouldn't be there. Because it's illegally built, and you can tell like there's no really foundation. It's really poorly built. So, and you'll see here, it's actually the property is listed as a 2-1, but it's actually right now a 4-1 because of the addition. But he hasn't reported it, of course, because he wants to skip on his taxes. So that's how he is. This man is really cheap. He's really older. He's really sort of a slumlord, and it gets really ridiculous. At the top in number 2, you'll see the basically previous sale date. So you'll see that the last date when the house was actually sold, that means when banks actually bought the house, was January 12th, 1989. Since then, there has been no change of ownership. There's no new information on the website. Basically, it's just there. So in the meantime, all of this is happening. My mother has been trying to contact and basically talk to HUD and try to get them to say, hey, first, because she doesn't want to move. My mother also has major health problems. She had open heart surgery. Finding a new place, of course, is a little bit difficult because of the health situation of my Aunt Michele. And you have to find a place that's appropriate for someone who actually has these disabilities, meaning you have to find a place where the hallways are wide enough to be able to move her. The bathroom has to be big enough because she's a grown woman and you have to bathe her. That means you need room inside of the bathroom to be able to maneuver her so comfortably without hurting yourself or hurting her. These are all conditions that you have to find in an apartment in order to be able to move in. You just can't take any apartment that comes your way. So, basically, she's been trying to get them to get the house repaired and put pressure on him, but they refused to do so. One thing they did was they sent out an inspector, and this is where it gets really strange and questionable. Okay, so HUD sent out an inspector. You will see here. You'll see an inspector was sent out on May 3rd, 2024. The inspector was named Pedro Silva, and you'll see it failed. Now, it failed, and here's the detailed information about why it failed. So basically, a lot of things need to be repaired in order for it to pass. So it says deteriorated floors and support beams, basically in the bathroom. The bathtub is literally starting to lean down and to the side because the wood underneath the floor has been rotting for years, because they built basically this tub over wood that was already rotten. Instead of replacing the wood to save money, they just built it on top and just left it there. You have the bathtub. You have basically the support beams also for the back porch. There are big trees in the back, but there is also a power line that runs there. There's no one that comes to basically cut that tree to make sure it doesn't touch or harm the power lines, which is of course a very dangerous situation. There is the fence is basically around us. There's a fence that goes around the property, partially destroyed or defective. windows are not working properly. And if you live in Miami, you need windows because there's also there's little insects everywhere. You will also see that there's also no smoke alarms. And all of this list basically from Miami-Dade County, this list of all of the repairs that need to be done. Like I said, this inspection happened and it failed, and that was on May 3rd. Now, on May 7th, he came back to see if any of the repairs had been started, and nothing had been started. And then he gave it a final fail, which basically makes is supposed to be a penalty for the actual landlord. And HUD is now responsible for going to the landlord and saying, hey, you have an agreement with us that we pay you, and you have to make sure that ABC is done. One of those things, meaning the house needs to be in working order. It needs to be in a livable, sustainable order. Now, suddenly, we jump ahead till August 5th, and we have another inspector named Lytton Brown who comes out, and suddenly the property has been passed. But none of the repairs have been done. Not a single repair has been done. Not only has a single repair not been done, there has been no so people to come out to actually look to see what needs to be done. He knows what needs to be done because he's seen it before, like in the past. But since the quality control, when the landlord was informed on May 3rd that these repairs needed to be done in order to pass inspection, no one has come out. He has not sent anyone out to repair. But now suddenly it's passed. But there's a list of repairs basically that came directly from a colleague of Silvio's, the colleague of this last inspector, that lists all the repairs very clearly, what needs to be done. None of it has been done. So how could it pass inspection? And this is where the issue gets really crazy. How can a house pass inspection? There's no documentation that any of the repairs have been done, but yet it has been passed. And also, of course, this Lytton Brown has access to the document that Pedro Silva did, where it lists the list of what needs to be changed, what needs to be repaired. So it's not like he's not informed. So it all just seems a little sort of suspicious, and I hate to say it. I don't want to accuse anyone of anything, but it sounds a little suspicious in terms of, like, for me, it just sounds like someone's getting maybe something white envelope slid under the door, if you know what I mean. So, and still, HUD knows that Michele Johnson is handicapped. They know that she is severely disabled with cerebral palsy since birth. She knows they know that my mother is also ill and taking care of her all these years. And still, there is absolutely no one in HUD who will willingly take responsibility for this and follow through. They just keep passing it on to someone else, or basically not answering, not replying, not doing anything. And this is their responsibility. What's really sad is the fact is that HUD, of course, they're funded through our tax dollars. That means that your tax dollars that's actually been given to this organization for good use is being really just being used in such a misused in such a way, because now they're basically just, you're a landlord, get a house, okay, good, you're going to get paid what you need to get paid, what you want for the rent, because HUD is going to pay about 3/4 of it. So, and basically, since no one's going to hold you accountable for the repairs and making sure that you hold up your side of the bargain as a landlord, then why should they do it? Why should they do it? So basically, we're giving, and this isn't a unique situation. There are other people in the same situation, I know. And if you think about it, you think about how much money that's going out to landlords who are not holding up their end of the bargain and not being held accountable, but still getting money, still getting paid rent to allow people to live in squalor and in dangerous homes, and they're still receiving money, basically. So this is also so very questionable, and HUD has not done anything. She wrote a letter basically, she wrote a letter. This was 2024, so that she wrote a letter before to basically the main office in Washington D.C. And also one directly to President Biden. And now they're saying they're doing some research and they're trying to look into it, but nothing has happened since this date. They passed it on to the Miami office, and that's where it has been sitting since whenever it was passed on. And this is also the letter in which she basically says, hey, listen, I overpaid because you gave me the wrong rental amount, and you know this. We've had this discussion. Why don't you send me back my money? Yeah, this man is really like, if you really want to talk about greed, if you really want to talk about someone who is pushing 90 and is just obsessed with money, this is your guy. So, the last thing that happened is, so David from this Real Deal Investors did come to visit. My mom had a chance to explain some things, and he extended the time in which they have to move, And at this meeting, when he met her live, is when he told her that basically their idea is to kick her out, then do the repairs, and then up the rent. And rent it without HUD, which technically is their right to do. They do have a right to do that. But in this way, the way they're doing it, they're basically putting it in a situation. There's no support, and my mother is sick, and she doesn't know how to move forward. She's called lawyers. She's been reaching out for assistance for months now. And what's sad is that this HUD program, that they are basically just not taking responsibility or accountability for their actions. No one is following through. No one is helping them. And pretty soon, the next due date, because he sent another letter basically saying that he wants her out by November 1st. And get this, in this letter, he says not only does she has to be out by November 1st, but if she's there after November 1st, then he expects her to pay double the rent. And I don't know where that's legally binding anywhere. I've never seen anything. I did some research before. I can't find anything that says, hey, you pay double the rent. As a matter of fact, up until this point, he has not given her an official eviction notice, meaning an official eviction notice means you have to go to the court and tell the court, hey, I want to evict these people from the house for this reason, because we're canceling it, so that the person has an official piece of paper, piece of documentation that has been approved from the court that says, okay, yes, in so and so many days, say for example 14 days, you need to vacate the property, or else we can send the police to evict you. None of that has happened. There's been no official document that has been given to Sherice or Michele that states this, that comes from a court. It's just basically letters written on non-letterhead, misspelled, and given to her by a man who says he has bought the property, but we don't know if he bought the property. So, basically that's what this next letter says. This next letter basically says you need to move up by November 1st, or you have to pay double the rent, which I think is ridiculous. As I said, the new apartment, where if moving out is not if they have to move, they have to move. And my mother has accepted that. But she needs to find an appropriate place. She can't move into any apartment. Even if an apartment is free, that doesn't mean the apartment is actually built for the needs of taking care of Michele, like I said, who is a grown woman. So if you imagine trying to help someone who really can't even support their own weight, and my mother who's 67, trying to fumble with her to get her into the shower. So you need to have enough room in the bathroom. You need to get her into the tub on her special seat. You need to have a tub that's big enough that you can sit her in her special seat so she can bathe her, because you can't sit her deep into the tub because my mother can't get her out of the tub because it hurts her back. So all of this is happening, and you have the pressure coming from the landlord, and then you have no support coming from HUD. But it seems like HUD has no problem with giving out tax money over to this guy for no reason. So that is why I basically wanted to bring this topic up. There is a GoFundMe. I will put the link in the description below. For anyone who is willing and able to help, where I also add a description about the situation there with some photos. Any amount would be great. It would be a huge help to help them to try to move out of this situation. But in the meantime, we also need to start putting pressure on people like HUD. We're talking about economy, all this with politics and things of this sort, and we're realizing that our government agencies are so ineffective that money is just flying out. You have to imagine if you're in Miami and say there are in Miami there's 5,000 properties and only 10% of those are having this issue. That's millions a year of just money flying out the window because no one is taking responsibility or taking action in situations like this, where landlords are not doing what they're supposed to do. They're not holding up their it's clearly stated what their obligations are and not doing it, and they're not being held to task. So, like I said, the situation is sort of dire. If anyone has any comments or any suggestions or any sort of anything that may help in terms of maybe advice in terms of how to move forward, that's greatly appreciated. Again, like I said, there's a GoFundMe page. If you're able to donate, whatever it is that you can, that would be wonderful. We would appreciate it. And I will keep you up to date on this situation. So we just have to think about, we need to hold people to basically, they're working with our money, and we can't forget that it's our money and it needs to be handled properly. So at this moment, I will say that that's the end of the New Ways podcast. Like I said, our second podcast is going to have Jason Stetzer, who is my best friend and cultural anthropologist, and we're going to be talking a little bit about our friendship. And because he does cultural anthropology, we're going to talk a little bit about his educational background, how he went into the realm of cultural anthropology, so why that, and also talk about some recent issues, especially the topic of Karens, which we find very interesting, and he's working on a paper based on that. So we want to talk about sort of race relations in America, and especially the Karen phenomenon. And it'll be fun. We're both, he's hilarious, but he's also amazingly intelligent. And so I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And I think it will be an important conversation, an interesting conversation, but also a fun conversation. So join us next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. And wherever you are, I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care.